Welcome back. Over 50 years ago, there was an historic Indigenous uprising in Ontario, protesting racism, police brutality, and the seizure of Indigenous land. A new documentary explores this occupation in detail. Take a look.
My government will never negotiate under the threat of violence.
You said that you're prepared to offer the support of the American Indian movement if it's required. What do you mean by that?
The police start beating Indians again down in the streets because they want to be heard. That's all it takes to require it. If the native people up here ask for our help, they will get it.
Do you think you'd be able to get into Canada under those circumstances?
Do you think they can keep us out?
Yes, very powerful. The film is called Ni-naadamaadiz, Red Power Rising, and it is premiering at TIFF this year. And we are thrilled to have the film's co-producer and co-writer, journalist Tanya Talaga, back here at the Social. Welcome back, Tanya.
Thank you.
Wow.
Tanya, it's a powerful documentary, and in many ways, this particular historic land back occupation has been written out of history. I had certainly never heard of it. We haven't heard of it. In what ways did you want to write this occupation, and in particular its leader, Lewis Cameron, back into our collective history with this film?
You know, it's so important that Canada knows the truth. It's so important that our own people, Indigenous people, Anishinaabe, know the truth. And this was a story that I'd never heard of at all, you know? And I'm Anishinaabe from Fort William First Nation. This happened in Kenora. It was an occupation in 1974. All of these kids, including Louis Cameron, are coming out of Indian residential school, and the kids are disconnected from their own home communities. They can't get work in Kenora. They can't get served in restaurants. They can't get to see a doctor or have an apartment rented to them. And so they're frustrated and they want to know what's going on. They look to the south and they see the US civil rights movement. That is such a huge influence on them. And so then they decide to occupy Anishinaabe Park, this park that for generations families would use as a stopping point and a campground. And the city took it over and made it their own park. So the kids decided, you know what, we're gonna stay here, and they staged an armed occupation.
Mm-hmm. So, as you just said, this occupation took place at Anishinaabe Park in Kenora. And in one magazine, you read that this is what was happening in Kenora, that if you were a non-Indigenous boy living in Kenora during this time, you would have beaten up an Indigenous person by the time you were 14. Okay, so you were talking to us about discrimination. This is why it's so important that we talk about this on a national scale. Yeah. When people think racism doesn't or didn't exist in Canada, just how bad was the discrimination against the Indigenous people in Kenora?
It was awful. You know, what you were talking about was the Kenora Indian beaters. That was the phrase that was used when it came to how gangs of non-Indigenous youth would beat up First Nations people. You know, it was an awful thing. There's still so much of that violence too that we see still bleeding through into today. Murdered and missing women, issues with police, issues with our people not having homes or jobs, and issues with the city council or the city or the people that live there. These are all the same things that we're seeing in small town Ontario, across small town Canada, you know? When I was researching and writing the story of Louis and the Ojibwe Park warriors, I thought a lot about Thunder Bay. I thought a lot about The Seven Fallen Feathers, my first book, and I thought about this institutional racism that our people face constantly. And you really see the effect of that, the intergenerational effect of that, still today in Kenora.
Mm-hmm. As you mentioned, this film was led by this 24-year-old man named Lewis Cameron. And in the film, Lewis's son speaks about his father, and he explains how many people at the time called his father a terrorist. for staging this occupation, and he calls him a warrior. Talk about why do you think he had to make that distinction? I mean, you know.
Yeah. Well, you know, the thing is that if you stood up and tried to defend yourself, if you said during that time, you know, in the early 1970s, in the 80s, 90s, 2000s, if you tried to stand up for your rights, you would be knocked down. You know, this occupation was almost 40 days long, and the kids, they basically all got into cars when it was done, and they went to Ottawa as part of the Native People's Caravan, and there were hundreds of youth. Louis was helping to lead them, along with youth from BC, the Cache Creek Warriors. They all went to demonstrate and demand their human rights, and they were met with police brutality. It was a massive, massive, violent takedown, essentially, of all of the youth that were there. Why is that still happening, you know? And how come we don't know about these things that happened in history? Where was the media? Where is this in our history books?
Yeah, there's only 8 minutes of footage that you found.
Exactly. You know, we had archivists on this for years. I think it's been 7 years since I started this project. We were looking everywhere, and it was hard. You know, there were newspaper articles, but sadly, the newspaper articles that we were finding were not the best. They were one-sided, and they weren't fair towards those kids in the park.
It's so interesting when you say, or I think it was somebody in your film who said that guns and violence are not a part of our culture. It's a part of their culture. And speaking of the police. Okay, let's talk about this is a turning point for Indigenous activism in many ways, even though we had not known about it. What do you think the legacy will be? What will be its legacy today?
You know, I hope that our youth see this. I hope that Canadians see this film and know that we have heroes. We have warriors. We are not terrorists. They are not terrorists, you know. We interviewed so many people that were part of the park, and it's been 50 years, and their memories are still there. And they stood up for what they believed in. Ni-naadamaadiz. Yeah. It means stand together in Anishinaabe-Moan. Stand together and you protect what is right. And that is why it's the title of the film. And I hope Canadians see that and they realize the truth of this country.
It is called Ni-naadamaadiz, Red Power Rising, world premiere at TIFF, which is so fantastic. I know. So congratulations and thank you for being here, Tanya.
Hey you, come a bit closer. We've got so many more must-see interviews, spicy debates, lifestyle tips, and pop culture moments. So subscribe to our channel by tapping the logo below and don't miss out.